Hey, folks, welcome back to the Meta Abuse podcast. It's just me and Shaun here today. How's it going, Shaun?
Yeah, not bad, man. It's all right. Where the party's at anyway.
Yeah, it's just really difficult to get everybody together all at the same time. And Lucid's away this weekend, and I think the others were busy, so just the two of us. And we thought that we'd talk about indie games that really pushed forwards the genre that they were working in, or they might not have been specifically really innovative, but they were good examples of the genre. So they either pushed it forwards or they were just really, really good examples of the genre that really punched above their weight in terms of the gameplay that they were bringing to the table for the size of the teams that were making them. I think this is going to be an interesting topic because, well, I guess it gets into the nature of each of the genres that we're going to talk about. And Shaun and I have just gone through our Steam lists and we just picked a handful, really. And I think any one of these, titles that we're going to talk about would be the subject of a video alone because they are, or a podcast alone because they are big, big topics. Shaun, do you want to start and give us an example of a game that you think is a really good indie game that pushed things forwards?
Yeah, sure. So before I start, just wanted to point out this isn't an exhaustive list. It's not going to have every single game that does this on it. And I know there's other games that do it, like your Vampire Survivors or whatever like that. But these are games that we have played that we're familiar with. So we're just going off that. Yeah, so one that was recent that I really thought about because it's getting a lot of praise since it came out is called Tainted Grail, The Fall of Avalon. And that's from the publisher Awaken Realms. They do a lot of board games through Kickstarter campaigns and stuff like that. And they've actually done a card battle before this in the same universe. So what Tainted Grail, Fall of Avalon is, I'm just going to go with the Fall of Avalon to keep it a bit shorter. It's sort of like you've got your big AAA Bethesda games like your Skyrims and your Fallout and that kind of thing. And there's been a lot of devs, I think, that have tried to do games like Skyrim and it hasn't really worked. And these are sort of this Awaken Realms, there's sort of a quest line is called The Developer. I didn't know that, but they're sort of one of the first ones I think that have actually really managed to pull it off. And they've expanded on what Elder Scrolls does in some way. They've got improved combat. It's not, I don't want to say Soulsy combat because that seems like a lazy way to describe it, but instead of just being, hack and slash and do your special abilities kind of thing, it's got actual, parry and block and dodge systems. And so they've expanded on the combat, and then they've got all these really cool environmental effects. They've got this thing called the Weird Night. And when it goes to night, basically this fog comes over and it spawns in new enemies, and they're a lot more deadly than regular enemies. And there's a lot of really cool little mechanics like that they've put in that I think do a good job of expanding on the Elder Scrolls, big open world RPG sort of genre.
So it's still kind of like an open world game, kind of like Skyrim. I'll be honest with you, I played Skyrim. I didn't play any of the other Elder Scrolls games before that. I'm not a huge fan of third-person CRPGs. I do like them, actually. I really liked Fallout New Vegas. I thought that was a really good game. I enjoyed that. But I kind of preferred the older, 2D Fallout games, actually. So those are more my style. So, but I remember playing Skyrim, and I think Skyrim must be one of the first games that I saw that had this sort of branching skill tree that you could take your character, class in any direction. Do you reckon that's about right, or was it in games before that?
Oh yeah, so Elder Scrolls. Yeah, no, I don't think it's the first one to have like that branching RPG tree. I just sort of can't really think of anything before it that did it, but I'm sure it existed. And yeah, so I played a little of Morrowind, and this is later on, and then I played a heap of Elder Scrolls Oblivion because that was one of the first games I bought when I bought my own Xbox 360 as a kid, and that was one of the first games I got with it. And then I played quite a bit of Skyrim as well. And yeah, so I don't know, maybe it's just like one of the first, or I guess, if we're talking about it as an entire franchise, it's probably one of the first ones to really just put everything together in this massive open world package. And something like that, because they're such massive projects, it's really hard for any smaller studios to actually make a coherent product like that. And I feel like these guys are one of the first ones to actually pull it off. And that's why I thought it was interesting, because, you sort of get a lot of devs that have tried this at some point and it doesn't really work, or they have to scale it down and they just can't pull it off. And then these guys have actually finally managed to do it, and it works, and people are happy with it. It innovates with certain different mechanics. And yeah, so I think that's why it's doing quite well.
I remember you talking about this game before, and you were saying how it's got quite a unique theme to it as well, isn't it? Kind of like Arthurian legends.
Yeah, it's like a dark Arthurian legend. It's I don't know how it is because in this latest update they've redone a bunch of stuff and it's changed the story a bit. And I don't really know what it's like, but it's something like King Arthur has escaped to the Isle of Avalon or something because there's a plague. I think maybe it's like the Black Plague or something like that. So that they've escaped to the Isle of Avalon and basically taken all the people with him and then just kind of dumped them on the isle and then left them to survive. So it's very it's all quite dark and everything sucks and everyone's miserable bastards and there's this horrible mist that comes over the island every night and there's demons and stuff ghosts and crap that come out of the darkness and yeah, so it's all very dark and twisted and
typical night in the UK by the sounds of it.
Yeah. Oh, you would know if you lived there. Yeah. It's just really cool. Like it's sort of that kind of formula, but with several different twists, which I reckon is really cool because it's kind of thing like if you haven't really seen it done before, you just like it really stands out. You're like, all right, this is different. It's cool. I like it, and I like that twisted sort of vibe too.
I think it's really cool that it has a combat system that isn't just the, this is what we were talking about with Lucid the other day, wasn't it? He was talking about how he. You might not have been on this one, but when we were talking about Age of Wonders, we were talking about how often in games, a lot of video games seem to use the idea, the old Dungeons and Dragons style hit points as a bit of a crutch for games design now, where your battleship or your tank or your soldier is just a big stack of hit points. And you pump in enough bullets to it and it reduces the hit points gradually until the hit points reach 0 and then it dies. And if a battleship gets gets hit by another battleship shell, and it hits the ammunition dump, then boom, it's gone. There's no hit points. There might be an armor piercing roll, or some kind of dice roll to determine whether it glances off at the right angle. But yeah, generally speaking, things are lethal, right? And I think that if you can come up with combat systems that aren't just big hit point sponges that you got to chew through, which is a problem in Skyrim, I think. If I remember right, Skyrim is very much that kind of gameplay, even though it's got some very cool mechanics, and I actually enjoyed playing Skyrim quite a lot, for a bit. But it's definitely in that old school CRPG kind of style. So tell me about this combat system.
Yeah, so like you were saying, normally in your games you'd have, it's basically you just wail on the other, you beat each other up until somebody dies. And so this is a lot different because you've got active player-controlled abilities that can mitigate damage. Like you have an actual block mechanic where you can manually block attacks or you can manually parry attacks with certain timing, which I can't really think of a open-world RPG that's done a really good job of this. Like, I mean, you've got your Souls games, obviously, but this isn't really like that. It's in its sort of a different vein of its own. So, you've got your active abilities where your timing is important with your parry. If you stuff up a parry, you're going to take damage and that sort of thing. So, it's just adds that extra depth to the combat, I think.
So the way you're describing it actually sounds to me like one of the games that I want to mention when we're talking about kind of RPG games and open world games, which is Mount & Blade. Mount & Blade by Taleworlds, the Mount & Blade series. And I think the quintessential Mount & Blade game probably was Warband. I think Warband was the one that most people probably played the most of until Bannerlord came out. And there's still some debate over whether Mount & Blade Warband is the better game of the two. But Mount & Blade is very much like that. It kind of came it came out of nowhere, if I remember right, and from this kind of very small Turkish developer. It's a medieval simulator, I guess. You start with a single character, and then you travel the world. You hire a few soldiers, you kill some bandits, get some more money, and you travel around these maps. You can trade from town to town. It's actually a very simulation-based game. There's this whole medieval simulation going on around you where there are other lords who are working for their lieges, and they'll be going around and with their own war bands, and they'll be fighting in wars. And you can eventually get to the point where you're powerful enough, to be able to challenge some of these bigger powers. And if you're, so you can go literally from just being a single character to commanding a kingdom with, vassals who have all got their own war bands and they're all doing your bidding. It's a very, very big scope game. One of the nice things about Mount & Blade Warband, even though it's kind of an RPG and it's still got that RPG thing where, you can go into towns, you can talk to people and you get the list of, what do you want to say to them? And, and then there's quests and that kind of thing. But it's not like a set story like you would get in, sounds like, like the game you're talking about, Tainted Grail, or say Skyrim, which has got a bit more of a structured storyline to it. Mountain Blade's very much, it kind of gets you off, it gets you started on the game, but then it's like, here's this big open world. What do you want to do? Do you want to be it's like almost like Elite. It's very, when I first played Mountain Blade, it really reminded me of Elite, except Elite's obviously set in space and you're a space, you're flying a spaceship. But it's kind of the same thing. It's like a trading simulation. You can go and do combat. You can do bounty hunting, and it kind of gives you this sandbox within which to go and play. And so Mountain Blade has a very, very good combat system because it's skill based. So you have to manually parry attacks. You have to aim your sword in the direction that you want to hit people in. And if they hold their sword up in the way, then it can get in the way. It's not really quite a deterministic system in the sense that. I'm trying to remember. I might be thinking of Mordhau now. But Mountain Blade's not one of these where if you block, in the direction that your enemy is attacking in, it doesn't hard counter it necessarily. Like I think it's to do with hitboxes. So there's a lot of skill involved with regards to being able to kind of like dodge around enemy attacks, that kind of thing. So it's a really, really good combat system, and it's very, very meaty. And then you've got this whole tactical battle system as well, which I've not even talked about. Mountain Blade's a big game. And I think that, that is a great example of what we're talking about, where it kind of it was a small team. It took the genre forwards in a big way and just opened it up. Like it was like Skyrim, hold my beer, and it just, okay, well, Skyrim doesn't have an economic simulation. Well, we do. Skyrim doesn't have lords and, knights that will go out from their own territory and go and take other territories as part of this simulation. So you've got this kind of emergent gameplay. I mean, Skyrim didn't do that as far as I remember, not unless you mod it heavily. So it's very, very interesting and, expansive game. It was also a bit of a broken mess. Anybody who's listening to this will be going, wow, you're speaking very, 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 very highly of Mountain Blade Warband. And what I remember of it was janky, filled with bugs. And it was for a long time. It was buggy. I didn't actually come across Mountain Blade Warband until about 4 or 5 years after it had been out. So I came to it late. And it was one of those games where it was like, this is an overwhelmingly positive game. And it was available for a couple of pounds, and I bought it. And I was like, holy shit, this is an amazing game. Why have I not been playing this before? It was one of those games that I fell in love with so much.
See, my experience with Mountain Blade is more, you build your little warband and you roam around fighting bandits, and then you try to bite off a bit more you can chew. And then you get kidnapped by bandits and you get carted all around the countryside, and then you get dumped somewhere and you have to start over and over again.
Yes, exactly. And you do that a lot. You do that a lot until you figure, okay, what you can, what can you safely go near and what can you safely not go near? That was, I had to save scum the shit out of that game to learn how to play it. And you can't really do it in Warband. You just have to kind of like hard reset the game, if I remember right. So I just hard reset the game so many times because I just finally built up this warband of 100 troops, and they were all quite strong, and they'd all started leveling up because each individual troop levels up, right? And so you started leveling them up, and you were really excited, and then suddenly just some dickhead comes along with a bigger army and he wrecks you. And that's it. Like you say, he drags around, he takes you all over the countryside, and you finally escape, and you've got nothing again, and you got to go and beg to get all your heroes back and stuff. It's just so funny.
See, I used to just play along with that, and I actually really liked it. It was really cool, sort of emergent storytelling. It's like, you read those fantasy novels, and there'll be like a hero who's been, he got into a battle with another faction or something, and then got kidnapped, and he's riding along in a prison caravan, and then he escapes, and then somehow becomes the hero that saves the world or something crazy like that. You're not going to be doing that in Mountain Blade, but it still gives you that sort of storytelling vibe if you play along with it, which I thought was really, really cool.
Absolutely. No, I mean, and when I say I save scum the shit out of it, I did while I was learning the game. After a while, I kind of got to the point where I'd be like, okay, you learn when, it's a game of risk taking, right? So even if you've got a powerful army, there's always someone bigger than you. Well, usually until the very end game anyway, which I rarely reached. But, for the most part, you are always vulnerable to being defeated by somebody with a larger force. And that meant you had to find tactical, advantageous ground. I think Bannerlord's even better there because they've really fixed it so that the terrain that you fight, so the terrain that you are engaging in combat on actually becomes the battlefield in Bannerlord, which is a massive improvement to the game that they actually only added a few years ago. And I think when that came in, it really changed the game in a big way. Some people don't like Bannerlord as much. I think that the old game, had sort of, it was a little bit more difficult to do things because everything was a little bit more janky and indirect, if you follow me. So whereas in Bannerlord, it's like, oh, we know people were doing X in Mount and Blade Warband. Let's make it that a specific part of the gameplay now. And by sort of portioning these elements of gameplay off in a more direct way and giving specific game mechanics to make that style of play easier, I think some people feel it kind of took away some of the mysticism of it a little bit. And I don't want to speak for other people. I'm sure there's a billion and one complaints with Bannerlord. I mean, again, it was buggy and it's still buggy and unfinished. And actually, I think they're just about to release the first DLC for it. I don't know if you saw that, did you?
I saw something about it. I haven't looked too much into it. I don't know. Not long after release, I played quite a few hours of it, and then I put it down, and I haven't really come back to it. I do want to eventually, but yeah, I don't know. There's just so many games I just haven't really gotten around to it.
It's one of those games that's on my list of banned games now. So I have this list of what I call banned games, and they're games that are dangerous to my productivity as a human being. So unfortunately, Elite Dangerous is on there, even though I've started playing it again recently. Shaun and I have been playing it together actually a little bit, but Elite Dangerous is really dangerous for me to play because it's just really addictive. So is Mount and Blade Warband. Any of these games that are open world sandbox kind of games that have got really highly addictive gameplay because of the excellent combat, I can't touch those. So yeah, anyway, so that's, we're talking about CRPGs, right? And I think we've come up with a couple of good examples. Should we switch the genre on and talk about some games in another genre that we both like?
Yeah, I was just going to say real quick, like with the Mount and Blade thing, there is actually a game that's sort of built off that already. I think it was after it. It's like as inspiration, and it's called Voor de Kroon. It's like For the Crown in. You know what? I'm not going to say what the language is because I don't know, and someone might get mad at me. So, I think it's like Dutch or something.
It's called Dutch.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. So it's Mount and Blade. It's a solo developer project, and it's like a Mount and Blade kind of thing, but they've scaled it back. It's not as expansive a world, but it's sort of got a pretty basic economic simulation, and you've got it aims for more of a grounded in reality kind of thing, and it's set in like the Hollandic Frisia Wars, wherever that was. I can't remember what the time was. It was in the description. And it's really cool. I like the combat because it's got a bit more of a focus on realism. You don't have thousands and thousands of troops. A lot of them are just these fairly small skirmishes, and you can actually you can challenge the opposing army commander to a duel sometimes, and it depends on your reputation and your standing as an individual whether they'll actually fight you or not. Sometimes they'll just be like, yeah, no, you're a peasant, you're not worth my time. But then other times, if they agree to it, you can actually 1v1 the army commander and then win the battle without actually having to fight the battle. And then there's other things, like every now and then they'll have a tournament that could come up, and if you do it, you gain reputation with certain factions, and you can kill off champions from other factions in the tournament. And there's really cool combat. You can't just hack and slash with your sword. You can also do things like kick people, and I reckon it adds a little bit of extra brutality to the fighting. It's really cool. But yeah, so I just thought it was interesting. There's already a project out there that is taking inspiration from Mount and Blade.
That's cool, man. Like that sounds like it would be right up my alleyway as well, providing it doesn't go on my list of banned games. By the way, before we do move on, sorry, I was being a bit premature. I do want to give a shout out to the game Kenshi. Kenshi's very much like Mount and Blade in the sense that it's a big open world sandbox style RPG. Now, Kenshi's a little bit more about exploration and emergent storytelling than building up very big, powerful nations, although you can do that in Kenshi. But this is like a post-apocalyptic kind of sci-fi-ish world, a sci-fi fantasy world with a bit of a Japanese kind of theme to it, kind of Japanese-ish theme, I'd say. And, you are essentially ditched into this world with very little food and money, and surviving is really difficult. Combat is brutally hard. It went to the Dragon Ball Z school of combat training, where you have to get the shit kicked out of you over and over again in order to get strong. But the more that you get the shit kicked out of you, the stronger you get. And so combat is very, very difficult at the start of the game, and you will just get repeatedly beaten and beaten and beaten. But you can do things like, carrying rocks around will train your strength and that kind of thing. It's a really wild game. And you will go from exploring the landscape, finding, it's got a story, but the story is very much emergent storytelling, very much in the Dark Souls style of storytelling, which is my favorite way to do storytelling in video games, because I think that it really allows the imagination to go wild. So really, you're getting the story of what's gone on in this world, mostly through dialogue with characters, and there's not reams of text. like there is in something like Pillars of Eternity. You know, it's not like exposition heavy; it's exposition light. But the game is really, it really tells the story just from what's going on, and the world's very brutal. And you'll build up a small team of people, and you can even build your own settlements. It's got base building in it, so it's kind of like Mount and Blade except with base building. And the combat is very different. It's more sort of like almost like like pausable real time combat. Yeah, very very interesting game, Kenshi. If for those of you who've not played it, you really should go and check it out. It's one of the finest indie game RPGs that's ever been made. By far, it's so unusual and different to anything else that's ever been done. So yeah, it's an S tier game without a doubt. It's a little bit, it's pretty stable now, but for a long time it was a little bit broken, a little bit janky, and a bit buggy in places. But it's pretty good shape now, and there's loads of cool mods for it as well. So Kenshi gets my thumbs up, and it's another game that's on my banned list because if I start playing that, man, I won't play anything else.
Yeah, I haven't actually played Kenshi. All I've seen is a couple of videos and like that Seth Sinch. I can never get the channel name right. Yeah, he did that video. Yes, yeah, that one. Yeah, so all I remember really is seeing his video, and there's that whole meme about like Naruto running in Kenshi.
Absolutely, yeah, totally. It's a great game. It's one of those games that because it was quite low budget with the way that it was made. Even though it's magnificent, the presentation of the world. It's obviously because it's an indie game made by a small team, it's going to have some jank in it, right? And it's got some funny stuff. It's very much like Dwarf Fortress in that. By the way, we've got to talk about Dwarf Fortress. Let's just do that. Let's get it out of the way quickly. When it comes to indie games, there have been few, other than maybe Minecraft, that have. I mean, Minecraft was inspired by Dwarf Fortress as well. By the way, Dwarf Fortress came first, but Dwarf Fortress is probably one of the most inspirational games in the that's ever come out of indie gaming when it's in terms of what it's done to the games industry. Have you played Dwarf Fortress, Shaun, or is it one of those things that you just look at and just go, what the fuck?
I think I looked at it before it came on Steam, and that very much got the what the fuck thing. I was just like, I could probably figure it out, but it looks really intimidating, and I just don't really have the time these days to deal with it. It's if we were talking 10 years ago, I'd probably have a crack at it. Actually, maybe a bit longer than that. It's weird. You think, 10 years ago wasn't that long, and then you're like, wait a minute, no, that was actually a long time ago now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but it's one of those things. If it was, if I was a teenager or something, yeah, I'd have a crack at it for sure. But I just don't have the time now. And I know it has released on Steam, but I don't know. I'm very picky with what I play nowadays, and it sort of just looks a little beyond what I'd be able to sort of pick up and work with. But it looks really cool though.
So the big issue with Dwarf Fortress was that it was a hobby project, really, for Tarn Adams and his brother, the Adams brothers, and Toady One, and what's the other guy called? Anyway, sorry, I forget now. Zach, that was it. Tarn and Zach Adams. And part of the fun for them was to create this roguelike. It's basically how to explain Dwarf Fortress. It's a survival base building game where you take a colony of dwarves. They land in a certain part of the world. It procedurally generates the entire world, all the history of the world, the history of all the people. It's just this mind-bogglingly big, complex game. And then you build this dwarf colony, and the idea is that eventually, you dig down, you mine stuff, you build all these workshops. Your dwarves, more dwarves migrate in. And then, the colony gets bigger and bigger. It becomes more and more difficult to manage. And then eventually something will happen, like you'll either die to a goblin invasion because his sieges are pretty serious, or some big monster will come out of the depths and kill you. And then once you've lost the game, it then turns into a classic traditional roguelike where you can then go in and explore the dungeon that you made. This kind of as a dungeon crawler, so you can then go in and then you'll find all the treasures that your dwarves created. But it's I think most people are probably going to be at least a little bit familiar with Dwarf Fortress, so I won't go on too much about what it is. The reason why this has been why it's been just such a massive thing for the games industry is I think we can probably blame Dwarf Fortress for the fact that crafting has infected every game style ever since, because Dwarf Fortress, as I said, directly influenced Minecraft, and Minecraft is just exponentially bigger in terms of its reach. And another fantastic game, by the way, if you like that kind of thing. I think Minecraft is an S tier game. It's so good. If you like that kind of thing. And Minecraft's all about crafting, just like Dwarf Fortress has got crafting in it. And so I think that that was crafting was one thing that everything that got taken from Dwarf Fortress. Another thing that was taken from Dwarf Fortress is this kind of simulation game aspect. I think that many, like Mountain Blade's an example. I'd say Distant Worlds. I'm not saying that they're directly influenced, but games that are very much simulation-based strategy games. So yeah, Mountain Blade or Distant Worlds. I suppose you could even look at something like Shadow Empire. In the 4X genre, any game where they really try to simulate a lot of detail that runs in the background that might not even be necessary. I don't know if you know, but Dwarf Fortress, one of the reasons why it runs like shit on the original version, at least, is because it simulates the thermodynamics between each tile, right? So if there's lava on one tile, the heat from the lava will transfer into a brick that you've created, into a brick tile, and then that will diminish and heat the next tile next to it. So it simulates all the heat distribution. Now it's kind of necessary for the game, but it's not really necessary. Like most games developers would just not do that, right? Because it's just like, why are you wasting processing power simulating something that's not really going to be used in a big way? Oh no, they didn't care about that. They wanted to simulate everything. So I think this kind of like autistic detail simulation stuff that is very much pays a debt of service to Dwarf Fortress. Survival games in general were just changed by Dwarf Fortress because it is the quintessential survival game. You start off with a few dwarves, you just get a few resources, and then you are ditched in the land, and you got to make good with whatever you've got. So our buddy Daz Tactic, he's a big Dwarf Fortress streamer. I think Daz will probably agree here. I think he made his 60-odd thousand viewers on YouTube, subscribers on YouTube. A lot of them would have been from Dwarf Fortress videos, so he knows his stuff. He plays it a lot, and Daz likes to play Dwarf Fortress on the hardest settings. Like on these worlds, I can't remember what it's called now, but there's a type of biome in Dwarf Fortress where there's a necromancer tower nearby. So anytime there's a dead animal, it immediately gets resurrected as a zombie or a skeleton. So, for example, if you're dwarves, if they catch shellfish, to eat, because Dwarf Fortress is so detailed, right? There's so much stuff. Let's say your fisher dwarves catch a shellfish, they eat the shellfish, or it gets used in cooking. They'll throw the bones down, and then the bones will reanimate. So it's like kind of like zombie shellfish. It's ridiculous. So everything has to be locked down at all times, and you constantly get attacked by hordes of zombies. This is how Daz likes to play. Like he just likes to have werewolves infiltrating his fort, or these I can't remember what they're called now. The ancient terrors, or these are legendary or forgotten beasts. That's it. Forgotten beasts coming out of the ground. So you get dragons and stuff flying up from the depths. Dwarf Fortress, like if you, I don't know if this is going to be a spoiler, but let's just say if you burrow down too deep, the whole thing about the line from the Lord of the Rings where they were saying, the dwarves delved too deep in Khazad Dûm, that happens as well. So Dwarf Fortress, man, that is probably one of the most influential indie games that's ever been made. I think most people will never have played it because they wanted to make this obscure UI for it, and they didn't care about user experience at all. In fact, it was they saw it as a bit of a weird art project where they were just like, let's try and make it a bit convoluted and odd. And so it put a lot of people off for a long time, but I learned to play it on ASCII, and I think Dwarf Fortress in ASCII was a fantastic game. I actually played it more in ASCII than I ever did on Steam, but the Steam version is very accessible. Even my missus, who likes survival games, I got her playing Dwarf Fortress, there's no way she would have touched the ASCII version with a barge pole. It's not even the ASCII. The ASCII is not the issue. It's not the graphics. It's the convoluted keyboard controls. So it's like a roguelike control system, like a classic roguelike, like a ADOM or NetHack, except every screen is different. So the buttons change depending on what screen you're in. So if you're in the combat, if you're in the soldier management screen, the buttons are completely different to how they are in the let's say the colony management screen, or when you're selecting tiles to dig out or whatever. It's completely different. So you've got to learn this massive complex control system and constantly look at like wikis, and it was a real chore to play, but the Steam version is just a joy. So yeah, anyway, that's my monologue on Dwarf Fortress, and I think that's got to be up there with one of the most influential indie games that pushed gaming forwards in a big way.
That sounds like something I might hold on to till retirement and play when I retire.
Oh, it's so good, man. It's so good. You got to try Dwarf Fortress at least once, man. Just generating a world, yeah, and then it will generate all the legends, and it'll be like, Dwarf X, he killed a dragon, and then you'll be like, oh, what was the dragon called? And then you'll look at the dragon, and then you'll see the history that had, and you'll see that every event in the game is linked. So it creates this living mythology, and your characters, the dwarves that enter your fort, if you go into the Legends mode after you've played, you can trace their lineage right back to the start of the game, and who, what their ancestors did, who they fought, the goblins they killed, or the dragons they slayed, or, all these monsters. It's so cool. You don't even have to play the game to get fun out of it, man. You can just spend hours just looking through the Legends. It's so cool.
Yeah, well, that's the thing about indie developers too, is they can do this kind of thing. They have the flexibility and the freedom to do it because it's like, we're not beholden to shareholders or whatever. We can do whatever we want. And I think one of the other examples, sort of going back to open world RPGs for a bit, but Kingdom Come Deliverance from Warhorse Studios, that was their whole thing, right? Like they weren't trying to make, a big fantasy RPG like Skyrims or whatever like that. I know I keep saying Skyrim, but it's kind of the biggest one out there. So, they were leaning more heavily into the simulation and realism side a bit. And it was still an expansive, immersive open world. But they're talking medieval era Bohemia, and they've done. I played a little of the first one, more of the second, but that was their hard focus, right? They're not really trying to mass appeal to everyone. They're trying to make a specific product that they want to make, and then it ended up developing this cult following. And now the second one's just massive. I can't even remember how many sales it's got now. It's some ridiculous, like 7-figure number or something. But it's something something I've more noticed with the second one is it came out and it wasn't really, it had some like glitches and bugs, but it was pretty solid. And the sheer level of immersion and freedom to just go and do whatever you want is incredible. Like I got through the tutorial and then I got to the first town, and then there was some events that happened in the first town. And then it was after that, it says, right, you got to go attend a wedding, and then there's a couple other things you got to do. And then it just sets you out in the world and it goes, all right, here's some rough objectives. Just do whatever you want. Like you don't even have to go for the objectives necessarily. You can just do anything. So anyway, I went off and became a blacksmith. But it's I think Kingdom Come Deliverance 1 and 2 really have done something to push the entire genre forward in terms of like immersion and exploration and I guess quality for the second one.
I completely agree. I've not played the second one, but I really liked Kingdom Come Deliverance. I just thought it was really cool how that you can, you develop these relationships with the characters that you're interacting with. And the whole world felt real. Again, it was another combat system where they did some really unique things with the combat system where the momentum with which you swing your sword, that really was, even more so than Mount and Blade, it was very skill based. The combat's really hard in it, actually, I thought. And but it really rewards you practicing and learning it. And at the start of the game, just like with Mount and Blade, you suck. And just like Kenshi as well, you suck. If you start a fight with somebody who's an experienced fighter, you're going to die, unless you're very, very skilled with the combat system. So it's just a really, really enthralling. Oh man, I remember spending hours just doing the archery in Kingdom Come Deliverance, going down the archery range and just practicing on the archery range because the archery just felt so realistic. I mean, I've never done archery, so I don't know if it's realistic or not, but it sold that fantasy of being an archer to me, let's just say. And I just thought it was just such an immersive game. I remember one of the things that I remember really enjoying in that was there's one of the NPCs that you do some work for. She's like a noblewoman, and her husband's, I think he's sick or something, and you can have like a brief fling with her. And I don't normally do romance stuff in games. I just don't care. But the way that it was presented was really, really tasteful and also very, what was it? How to describe it? Just really quite romantic and sort of like, just really cute and done really well. The voice acting and the way that they'd done like this whole kind of coy sort of like relationship scene was just really, really well done. I've never seen anything done so subtly and really kind of like tastefully and respectfully before. Because what you're doing is kind of naughty, but at the same time, it really kind of you have to work for this particular scene. So like in order to kind of impress this woman, it's just really, I don't care about relationship stuff in games generally speaking, but I actually thought that was really, really intriguing and just top quality games development and games design and writing. It was just so well done.
Yeah, it's a slight tangent. I don't usually care for the romantic stuff either. Like, I started playing Baldur's Gate 3 a while ago, and I've been trying to do what I've dubbed as the no horny run, where you don't really engage with the romance system because I just don't really care. I played CRPGs as a kid, and obviously as a kid I never really cared about it either, but I sort of try to go off that same sort of mindset. But I don't mind it, but it's got to be, as you say, well written, quality, like believable kind of thing. It can't just be this gamey thing where if you pick the right buttons and you get to, I don't know, get laid or something. It's, yeah, if it's done well, I'm okay with it, but it's quite rare that they are done well enough to interest me.
I just felt that it was like it wasn't the focus of the story. It didn't really matter. It was just like a little reward you got if you push certain buttons and you wanted that kind of experience, and it didn't linger. It was so quick and just kind of done in a really tasteful way. And I'm like you, like my missus said to me, "Why do you think that Baldur's Gate 3 is so big?" And I was like, "I don't know, it's kind of a good game." She's like, "No. Why do you think it's sold so much?" And she said, "It's because it's massive with women." She said, "More women have bought that game than any other game before, probably." And I wouldn't be surprised if she was right. And she said, "This is the reason why Baldur's Gate is smashing it in the sales, because it's a relationship simulator behind the game as well." And she said, "Women eat that shit up." My missus played with this mod where we kind of opened up the relationships to make them a little bit easier, and you can kind of have relationships with anybody. She was playing for that. Like, she liked the combat and she loved the story, but she was playing for the relationships. And I'm telling you, she's not the only one. Anyway, we have gone off on a bit of a tangent, but I just thought that was just one thing that I remember from Kingdom Come Deliverance. That I just thought that it just really sold me on the fantasy of the world that you're in, that you were this peasant boy, kind of ending up doing these chores for this sort of like noble woman, and because her husband's, I don't know, he's sick or something, there's some reason why she's not with him anymore. She's not really together. So, it has a kind of like a bit of a cheeky fling with her, and there's, but it's just not like overdone. It's not like a hentai game or anything. It was just really tastefully done. I thought it was cool. Let's move on, Shaun. Let's talk about, okay, so in the tactics genre, there's a game that's come out quite recently. It's not quite finished yet, but it's by the Treese brothers, called Cyberknights Flashpoint. And I think the best way to describe this game is, if you think Firaxcom, or the Firaxis remakes of XCOM, and you mix those games with Invisible Inc., which is a stealth game, a stealth tactics game. So it's a cyberpunk game. It's set, in a cyberpunk, a classic cyberpunk theme with a dystopian world. Everyone's in these cities. It's all about stealing data, like hackers stealing data, and cybernetic implants. The cyberpunk stuff. The what's his name, William Gibson stuff. But it's just really, really well done, and the tactical combat in that game is chef's kiss. It's superb. And I was willing to hate this game. I was like, oh god, who needs another bloody Firaxcom like game? But I tell you, man, it's really well done. Like, remember in XCOM 2 where you get the stealth part at the start of the game? They try to inject stealth mechanics into the game to allow you to kind of sneak into a better position to get, a better, have a more tactically advantageous start. Well, Cyberknights, you can kind of play like that. You can build your team so that you are very much stealth based, and many of the missions you can play where you really don't want to be, you don't want to be exposed, because just like in XCOM, well, like in Invisible Inc., there's a security level. So the more people you kill, the more people who see you, the more this security level goes up. And there's certain things that you can do to reduce the security level. It's a little bit like AI War in that respect. It's got this AI that monitors what you're doing. And so you're rewarded for kind of staying out of sight, sneaking around, making use of the stealth mechanics. But when the fighting does take off, it's very much like, it's like XCOM, but it's just XCOM if sorry, not the original XCOM, but it's like, Firaxis XCOM. If you had a much bigger skill tree, the characters can go in different directions, way more items, and it's Treese Brothers. And if you know what they do, you kind of understand what I mean. So Treese Brothers also did Star Traders. They did a 4X game set in that universe as well, but Star Traders is like this kind of open world, a Mountain Blade-like sort of game with just tons of content. And I think Cyberknights is going to be one of those. It's going to have tons of content. Anyway, yeah, I really like that game. And I bought it a little while ago, and I put it on my, I had it on my wish list. I was watching the guys at Explorminate going on and on and on about it. And I was like, God, they're banging on about this game all the time like it's God's gift to gaming. I bet it's shit. And then, so I kind of bought it and I played it, and I put it down for a few weeks because I was like, this actually looks quite good. But it It looks like a game I might have to ban. And then I came back and played it over the last couple of days, and I'm hooked. Like I put about 7 hours into it in the last 2 days, which is naughty. So it's really damn good, man. What do you think, Shaun? Have you tried it yet?
I tried it just after it first launched into early access, and some of those systems were there, but at the time it felt pretty clunky, and I just sort of went, I'll put it down and I'll come back to it later. And I didn't refund it because knowing I don't think I've actually played any Trees Brothers games before, but I know of their reputation. So I'm like, it's not as if they're going to drop it or whatever. They'll get it sorted, and when it is, it does seem like it's up my alley. And I was just waiting for some major updates, and it's one of those things, you put it down and you're like, I'll come back to this, and then a year later people are talking about it and you're like, oh shit, that's right, I was going to play that. So it's sort of in that pile at the moment that I'm going to come back to at some point.
So your intuitions are right. Trees Brothers constantly update their old games. They're a bit like Stardock in that respect, except, I mean, perhaps even more so. They just did, on March 18th, they did an update to Star Traders Frontiers. And they didn't, they do regular updates to all of their games pretty much. Well, all of them, kind of what I would say is their current games. So Star Traders Frontiers is their big RPG game, their big CRPG game. And it's like Mount & Blade in space. It's a little bit like Star Sector, I guess, but not, it doesn't have the focus on arcade style combat. It's more got like Darkest Dungeon or, like a CRPG blobber style combat system. Star Traders is a really good game. But I couldn't get into it for a while because I didn't like the art style, but actually I kind of got over it. And if you can get over the art style in that game, it doesn't bother you. I think the game is actually really good. But Cyberknights is a 3D game. It's actually really well produced. It's probably got this graphics that are equivalent to the original Firaxis XCOM. Now I know that's a really old game now, but the graphics were good on that game when it came out, if I remember right. So it looks pretty damn good, and there's loads of customizable abilities, like customization that you can do, because Trees Brothers really like that stuff. They like you to be able to, customize your characters to really get you immersed in the world. The writing in the game is really good, I think. It's just Neuromancer. If you've read a William Gibson book, or if you're into cyberpunk stuff, if you played Cyberpunk 2077 or any of the RPGs, you'll know what you're getting yourself in for. It's just pulp fiction cyberpunk writing, but it's just dead good. It's just really immersive. I really enjoy it, and it's an absolute steal. So that is really pushing the tactics genre forwards in a big way. Our buddy at Explorminate, Jesse, he's been raving about this game, and I had a chat with him about it the other day, and we both agree that Cyberknights Flashpoint is displaying a understanding of the tactics genre that is beyond anything we've seen for a long time. I think it's so well designed. I need to play a little bit more to be able to quite pinpoint why I think it is, but I think partly it's because you've got so many tools. You've got a mission to do, in the game. It's also got like some base building stuff, and it's very much like Firaxis XCOM in that respect. It looks very much like it. You unlock rooms, and then you build things in the rooms in order to upgrade your sort of like campaign capabilities. But at least in the tactics side of things, you're not locked into any one play style. There's loads of different characters. There's a bunch of character classes. You've got I think you can have 4 team members in each match, in each tactical battle. But you're encouraged to try to complete the missions quickly, because the stakes get higher and higher the longer you go, and the more you're seen. It's also got this amazing hacking simulation game. And if you've ever played the introversion game Uplink, oh god, that's another one we could put on this list. But if you've ever played Uplink, and you ever played the local area network content in that, where you're trying to hack local area networks, it's almost a carbon copy of that. So you'll come up against a firewall. You need to use some software to knock the firewall down, and that'll allow you access to the other nodes. And then you're on a time limit, because you're still on a turn timer. So you'll have to go in, and when I say turn timer, by the way, it's all turn based. So you've got a certain amount of action points. But when you're in the hacking mode, the action points is inflated, because the hackers are working with a cybernetic implant. It's all quicker, but it's cool. So do I go for the data? Let's say your hacker's just been seen by a security camera, and there's guards around the corner, and your other guys can't save him, right? The hacker's going to get blasted unless he finishes what he's doing. So I've got X amount of time to be able to get what I need to get. Do you complete your mission, or do you go for the data, which is you can sell this, like you can steal data, and the data can be sold on the black market for money, which you're going to need? Or do you use that time to shut down some of the security, take the heat off the guys who are doing the main mission? It's just so good, man. There's so much to think about, and every system in it is just really, really well done. The UI is pretty nice as well. A lot of people are saying that the UI they think it's exemplary. I'm kind of immune to UI stuff, to be honest. I'll only notice UI if it's a problem, and I don't really care about UI design very much. So I don't have much to say on that, although I think to me, it just came across a very generic tactics game interface. But I think a lot of people are praising it for presenting the information that you need in order to play the game in a way that it doesn't involve any searching. And I think that's an important thing.
Yeah, okay, I'm sold. I'm going to have to go back and have a look at this. Yeah, there is, I was thinking with the tactical stuff you're talking about with the combat and the stealth-based stuff there, it's really quick and then I'll move on to something else. But there's a game, it's not a solo dev, there's another guy that helps him out, but it's called End State. And it took ages to launch it. Something like their publisher, the dev team fell apart, and then there was one guy trying to do it himself, and then it eventually came back out again. And it was quite rough because they basically rebuilt the whole thing about 4 or 5 times. And now it's had several major updates. It's nowhere near done yet, but they've put a lot of work into the tactical combat of that as well. And there's a stealth thing where at a certain range, people will hear you. They're sort of aiming for realism kind of thing where people might hear you even though they can't see you. So, and then brings into like silenced weapons, and I don't think they've got melee weapons yet, but it's very heavily stealth based because you want to get in, and it relies on ambushing people before they can really respond, because once they do, you're going to have enemies start pouring in if an alarm goes off and that kind of thing. So, and then there's a reaction mechanic built in as well, where even if someone has Overwatch, they need to have more points in a certain stat than you. I think it's like reaction times or something. And if they do, even though you're shooting them before, like, they still may be able to shoot you before you can shoot them. Like, there's a whole counterplay thing. So yeah, there's a few games that are doing some really cool stuff, but I don't know, for the most part, they're very small projects, but I always think it's cool if you see any of them that just try to do something different instead of just trying to copy and paste XCOM, which some of them I like, like even, was it 40K that with, what was it? With the Grey Knights.
Mechanicus.
Yeah, Mechanicus, but there was also the one with the Grey Knights. I can't remember what it's called now. Anyway, so anyway, I don't mind some of them if they're done fairly well, but a lot of them are just trying to do more or less the same thing. So anything like that where they just do something different really stands out to me, and I like it.
I think the tactics genre is a very, very fertile breeding ground for iteration on games design, because it's a little bit like shoot 'em up games. I don't know if you're familiar with shoot 'em ups. I play them, but I'm not an expert on the topic. But shoot 'em ups are very, very constrained games, right? When you're doing a shoot 'em up, because it's like an arcade game, everything has got to be perfect. You don't want anything extraneous in the game. You cannot get away with it. Everything's got to be pixel perfect, literally. And I think that tactics games are a little bit closer to things like shoot 'em ups in the sense that you want to avoid too much fat on these games, because if the fat distracts you from the core gameplay, then they kind of get annoying, right? And at least I think they do. And so tactics games are a little bit like shmups in that respect, because they really reward developers who hone in on what they're trying to do, and you can iterate on these, on ideas and sort of push your way towards this game design. Whereas something like a 4X, you can bang in sort of few systems like, things like diplomacy or espionage that might not necessarily be, they might not necessarily be tied in that deeply towards the game's main thrust, but they're there to add a little bit of immersion or to add some extra stuff for the player to do. Not that that's necessarily a good practice in games design. However, there's a lot of developers who do that. They tick the has espionage box or has diplomacy, but I think tactics games particularly are very, very fertile breeding ground for for tight games design. And just go back to Cyberknights. You were talking about the stealth stuff. That's got all of that. It's got you can sneak around behind people. They've got a hearing range. There's special abilities that you can use to kind of to stop them from being able to hear you temporarily, or to sort of zip past people when they're through their line of sight. It's pretty wild, man. So I think there's a few other tactics games I just want to mention quickly. So Wildermyth, have you played Wildermyth?
No, it's another one I have. I remember there was some people raving about it. I think it was the art style kind of turned me off. I still have it. I just never ended up playing it.
Yeah, so the Wildermyth's got a bit of a problem in the sense that the way that it's presented looks a little bit too kind of like a kid's thing. Like, it looks like a kid's cartoon, which is a bit of a problem for a lot of people. Like, for me, aesthetics are really important with role playing games and tactics games and stuff like that. So it's got this kind of like, oh, you're paging through a storybook, but it's a really good tactics game. It's a solid, it's a solid tactics game. It's a little bit more on the puzzle side of things than something like, it's kind of like Fantasy X, Fantasy for XCOM, but it's got very, very interesting procedurally generated stories. So the missions kind of are like thrown together in a loose theme, but you create these characters, and then what it will do is it will throw your three main characters that you pick into these different roles, and they'll have like relationships with each other and stuff as the game goes through, and you kind of have to pick choices about what you want to do. But it's heart, it's a tactics game with a sort of campaign overworld map, and you have these these kind of like story based scenarios that you work your way through, and your characters will develop. It's very, very good. It's a very, very good game, and if you can get past I think most people would be fine with the art style. I'm a little bit turned off games when they look like they're for kids, and I know that sounds like, I'm not trying to be like some macho dick or whatever, but for example, anthropomorphic animals in games will just turn me off. So it's got a lot of like that kind of stuff. But I think if you can get past that vibe, it's a very, very good story-rich, procedurally generated tactics game that's very, very cool.
Yeah, with the anthropomorphic thing, that was like with Mutant Year Zero. I mean, it's based off a tabletop RPG that's around mutated animals, but yeah, it's still got the anthropomorphism thing. Just quickly, that one I was thinking of about the art style that turns people off. Do you remember that game? I'm pretty sure you played it, Last Regiment, that simultaneous turn-based thing with the deck builder and the, I don't know what you call it. It's not really it's a turn-based strategy game for sure. Like, there's a map and you got to take different resource points and that sort of thing. But that was the same. Yeah, that was the same sort of thing. And it launched, and it had a UI and like graphics and stuff that looks sort of like a mobile game or a kids game. And they're actually really good strategy games, but because they look like the way they do, the sales were so poor that it almost sunk the company, and they're never going to make them again. They made two games. The other one was like something of Kalasia. I can't remember what the other one was, but there was that one that was before this. And yeah, they brought them out, and they were really good. And I remember they were asking about it, and they go, "Oh, what's this? These things are selling really poorly. Does anybody know why?" And a lot of people came back and they said, because it's the way it looks. It looks like a mobile game, and it looks, maybe like a gacha game kind of thing, and people just aren't going for it.
I remember the developer came into the Explorminate forum and asked, into the Discord and asked, and we were like, "Yeah, it's the art style." And I said, and he was like, "Yeah, it was like his wife who did the art." And the thing is, the art isn't bad. It's actually really good in that game. And just to elaborate on what Shaun said, so. Last Regiment is basically a tactics game. It's like, I guess it's a little bit like Battle for Wesnoth, but made by I think it was a Korean couple. I think they're Korean. I'm sorry, guys, if I've got you wrong.
I think that I could be wrong too. I think it was Singapore. I think the studio is based out of Singapore. Yeah.
Okay, sorry, apologies, but yeah, it was somewhere in East Asia, and I actually think the art in that's really good, but I think that's possibly why it did look like a mobile game. But God, is the gameplay good in that game? Like our Japanese friend Miyabi-san, SFG Miyabi, he was raving about that game for ages and trying to get people to play it because they wanted more people playing it. It's one of the notable things about that game is it's WeGo, so it's designed for multiplayer, and it plays really well in single player actually. But if you play it as a multiplayer game, you can have 5 or 6 people all playing this tactics game, and it's fast. It's quick because it's WeGo, so everybody makes their turn at the same time, and then it kind of like plays it all out. It's a fantastic game. It's really good. It's a real shame that didn't do better. And yeah, it is, because I'm afraid to say that old people like me who like tactics and 4X games and stuff like that, if you make your game look a little bit too shiny and polished, like it's been made for a cell phone, we're going to pass it over. And I'm sorry, it's just dems the grits. It's the hard truth. If something looks like a mobile game, I'm going to be well turned off it. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of Unity games fail as well, because a lot of the developers, they reuse assets that they've got from the Unity store. And so all the games look the same. I mean, let's look at Wizard Warfare. What's that other one? Wizard Warfare, Wizards and Warlords. There's a bunch of these Fantasy 4X games that all look basically the same because they all seem to use the same assets, and they're all hex-based games using that same Unity hex engine. I'm even if the game is really good, and by the way, Wizards and Warlords is a really good game, I think. It's such a hard sell to get people past that overall hump because you see those assets and you're just like, oh, I've played this already 1,000,000 times. Why would I bother?
It's not even just that sort of game either. There's what was that one I played a while ago? Void Marauders. It's kind of like a XCOM sort of game. I haven't played it in ages. I got to get back to it actually. But it was a solo dev project again, and I think we got a code for free or something to cover it in some form. I can't remember what it was. This was ages ago now, and it was pretty good even early on. You know, it's got the cool combat. You got these customizable. You're sort of playing like a what do you call it? You've got your own ship and you've got like a mercenary company and you can customize your mercenaries and their weapons and all that kind of thing. And I remember there was this really cool thing where basically you could fly around in a star system and you could pick out ships and you could engage them. And then you'd launch like a 40K style boarding pod and it'd crash into the ship and then you'd get into like this combat on the ship and you'd take over the ship or whatever. So that was really cool. But again, it's the store-bought assets. It just makes them look... Everything looks the same and it looks generic and it's like it's not fair, but it kind of makes it look like they didn't really put the work in, which is that's probably not even the right way to say it, but I think you get wrong what I'm saying. But even it could be like really innovative and really interesting, but it just kind of makes it look generic and like the same thing over and over again. And it's not even just that. There's another game, I can't remember the name of it now, but it's been on my wish list for like 2 or 3 years now. It's doing like a freelancer style thing and they've got all these really cool mechanics and they're always working on it and it always goes dirt cheap. Like I think it's $6 or $7 or something in Australian, which is nothing. Like, it's the price of a coffee. And I still don't buy it because every time I look at it, it's the Unity assets. You look at it and it just makes it look kind of cheap. And it's a real turnoff. Okay,
so there was another game that I wanted to talk about, and Shaun and I have both bought this game because we were like, I was like, Shaun, I'm going to buy this game, but you got to play it with me. Are you going to buy it as well? And he was like, yeah, I'll buy it. So I convinced him to buy Rabbit and Steel. And Rabbit and Steel is a very, very unusual game. I've never really seen anything quite like it before. It looks like a bullet hell shmup, like some kind of anime, like Toho or something, except it's a side-scrolling one. But it's not like that because it's not really a shoot 'em up. You control a character, and your character has like 4 attacks, several different attacks, and they've all got different timing and different DPS, different damage. And then you navigate your way through the maps like a shmup. It's like a bullet hell, so the enemies will fire these bullet patterns, and you've got to kind of dodge them. But it's also like more like a MMORPG style combat situation where when you have a boss and you've got cooldown timers on all your abilities and you've got to maneuver yourself into a position around the boss to be able to attack it with one of your attacks, and then it will do some kind of like pattern based attack that you've got to escape from. That's Rabbit and Steel. And if you imagine that as a 2-player game, so you're basically playing as these bunny girls. I think it's probably the best way to describe it. These rabbits, they're just like cute bunny girls, and you got different character classes, like you got like an assassin class, you got a mage, but you're all flying, right? And you're firing these bullets and stuff. I can't really describe it. It's just a really odd game. But Shaun, what did you think of Rabbit and Steel? Because I think it's a really, really damn good game.
Yeah, I got to say, normally this is not something that would appeal to me in a million years. It's so weird. I don't really go for the anime thing. I mean, it's not as if I hate anime or anything. I've watched a few of them, but it's just not really my thing. It's weird, but it works and it's really cool. It's sort of like you said, shoot 'em up, and then it's almost like out of an MMO, where you get your loot and you fight a couple of trash mobs, and then it's kind of a boss rush at the end of the dungeon, and then they've got all these crazy mechanics, and you got to try and figure out what's this going to do, and then they got like these gravity field things and lasers and crap, and then that's when your shoot 'em up thing comes in, and you got to dodge everything, which is kind of the bit I suck at. But it's weird, but well, definitely fits the bill of what we're talking about.
Yes, it's definitely pushing things forward, right? So if you think about a standard shmup, like Dodonpachi or something like that, where it's really pixel perfect, and you've got to be dodging these big patterns of incoming bullets that work like terrain that you've got to kind of move around, right? It's a little bit like that, but instead the bosses are often it's rather than like big swarms of geometric patterns that you've got to dodge. There is a bit of that, but it will also do zoning area of effect attacks as well. So it'll be like there'll be a big circle appear on the screen, and it'll indicate you've got to move out of that, right? So you'll have to move away from that, but that's usually where you want to be to try to attack the enemy. So it's a really tactical game because you've got to navigate these timed attacks, these area of effect, area of denial attacks, and then they'll be firing all these patterns of bullets at you at the same time. So it is very much like a bullet hell shmup, but it's not super twitchy, like a classic cave style shmup is. It's slower paced, more considered, and it's all about picking the right attacks because all of your weapons have got different DPS, and then there's character classes, and it's 2-player, and it's rabbit and steel. It's bizarre.
It's just kind of random. This isn't even a tangent. I'm just sort of having, I don't know if you've played Destiny or Destiny 2 at all, but with the way that Rabbit Steel is very mechanics heavy with the boss fights, it reminds me of Destiny, because I've played, I don't know, a bunch of different MMOs, not all of them, but a lot of them. And I think Destiny is, as far as MMO, like, more modern-ish, post-2000s kind of MMOs go, is one of the more interesting ones with boss fight mechanics. Some of them, they repeat the same sort of thing, but there's a lot of them with your raid bosses and that, where they do have multiple stages, and then it'll be like you've got to do one thing and then do another thing. You've got to run up and hit buttons in certain sequences and then jump into a shield or something like that, and then whatever. Yeah, and then rinse and repeat. So it gives me sort of that kind of vibe where it's quite complex and mechanically intense, where you have to do certain things. It'll be, like they'll fire the bullets at you, you dodge the bullets, and then there'll be like some kind of gravity laser thing, and then there's a shield bubble thing that you have to stand in so that the lasers don't kill you, and then there'll be something else, and then you can go out and start doing damage again. But it's intense. Yeah, that's all I've got. It's pretty intense.
I just think it's a really good example of a developer identifying an aspect of a game that people like, which is the boss raids in an MMORPG, and the way that those, you have to work around their attack patterns, and then mixing it with a shoot 'em up, with a shmup, and having this bullet hell thing in there as well. It's just a really, really ingenious. And I think I like stuff like that. I like to see games that blend genres in a really unusual way. Inevitably, people always slap the roguelike tag on it, which bugs the shit out of me because it's nothing like a roguelike, but it's got some roguelite mechanics, so it's kind of a little bit like something like Binding of Isaac, which is not a roguelike, by the way. Anyone who calls that game a roguelike needs to be executed. It's a wonderful game, but it's not a fucking roguelike. Spelunky's a wonderful game, but it's not a fucking roguelike. But by the way, let's talk about Spelunky. Have you played Spelunky?
No, I've heard of it, and I think I heard people talk about it a lot, but I've never played it.
God, that's a good game. Okay, so Spelunky is a game made by a gentleman named Derek Yu, back in about 2009, I think, or 2008. It was a free kind of 8-bit, also it's sort of like 8-bit looking platform game with procedurally generated maps, which is why it gets the roguelike term. But it's nothing like a classic traditional roguelike. It's a platform game like Super Mario, except all the levels are procedurally generated, and it's fiendishly difficult. So, for example, it's really cleverly designed. It's like, imagine Indiana Jones, right? Your character looks a bit like Indiana Jones, and you're in this sort of like ever shifting, procedurally generated maze. It's split into levels. I think there's 4 levels for each kind of stage, or there's 4 stages to each biome, if you want to call it that. So the caves at the start will have 4 levels, and what you do is you navigate your way through. It's just a classic platform game, but there's loads of traps, so you've got to watch what you're doing. Like there are things that spit arrows at you, these kind of like blocks that spit arrows at you, so that in order to draw the arrow out, you'll have to pick up like a snake or something a rat or something off the ground, or a kind of like pot, and then you drop it down, and then that will set the trap off so you can get past it. There are areas where you've got to use bombs to blow up the walls, and the walls are all destructible or mostly destructible. There's treasure to find, and the more treasure you get, you can then spend in these shops. So that's where the roguelite thing comes from, because you can then go through and pick up, these persistent bonuses that you can get, like climbing shoes, which help you climb better, or a parachute if you fall too far, this kind of stuff. And and then there's it's just this crazy trap. Like, it's even got the whole, you pick up the golden idol and a massive ball flies out the wall and crushes you. So, but it's so difficult, and that game changed platform games forever because most people will probably be familiar with Spelunky HD, which is the one that you get on Steam. But the original game is still very playable. It's like the original sort of 8-bit kind of indie game thing that Derek you made. But Spelunky HD, if you go and check that game out, you'll see that it's infinitely replayable. It's one of those games where they have like a level of the day, or like a seed of the day, so people can challenge themselves, to see how far they can get on that particular seed. But the reason why it's so good is that the procedural generation is programmed to set up traps. So, for example, it will lure you. They'll let's say that you can see a treasure that you want to get, right? If you just run and jump for that treasure, chances are a spider will drop on your head, or an arrow will shoot out the bloody wall, or something will happen that it's programmed to do. But it does it in novel ways, and it's also got emergent gameplay. So, for example, you might use a bomb, and the bomb would explode some of the ground, but you didn't notice that there's something that falls down, right? What that does is, let's say there's a pot or a monster, it falls down as a consequence of dropping off this now gaping hole. That will set off a trap, so the trap will fire off an arrow, and that arrow will fire and hit an exploding barrel, and that exploding barrel will cause a chain reaction with stuff around it. So it's chaotic. It's really chaotic. So you've got to watch what you're doing at all times. You've got to play carefully, but there's also a time limit, because if you don't finish the levels in time, this ghost chases you. It's like horrifying ghost that is really big and difficult to get around. God, it's a good game, man. If you've not played Spelunky and you've got even the remotest interest in platform games, I would put it up there with Super Mario. And I know that's a big thing to say, but I think in terms of quality, I think Spelunky HD is up there with Super Mario as being incredibly well designed. It's one of the best games ever made, and there's a reason why people always bring it up when they talk about fucking roguelikes. It's not a roguelike, but it's an amazing game.
Yeah, I don't know. Platformers aren't really my thing. I kind of suck at them, but yeah, I've definitely heard of it, and people always praise it really highly. So it's certainly up there. There was a couple things I was going to lump in together, and they're strategy games or 4X sort of games, but they're games where the developers have stripped out mechanics to improve the game to an extent. So that would be Gladius and Zephon, well, not so much Zephon, but more Gladius from Proxy Studios, and Slipways. So that's a solo developer project. I actually can't remember who did it. So these are both examples of where you would take a 4X and then you'd strip out at least one of the major mechanics. So with Gladius, you strip out your diplomacy and your trade, and you've just got your war, your city building, and your research. And then Slipways, you've pretty much stripped out the combat part. And there aren't other players, but it's more focusing on the economic production side of things. So, yeah, I just thought they were both really good examples of, if you take an established genre and you take something out of it, you can actually end up with something really good from doing it.
Yeah, that's very much kind of what we were talking about with Rabbit and Steel, where a developer has identified what works in a game genre and then, chipped away at what doesn't. And I think that one of the big weak points with 4X games is diplomacy. Diplomacy breaks 4X games if it's not done right. It was done perfectly in the very first 4X game, which was Master of Orion. Okay, we're going to argue. People are going to argue with me whether it was really the first 4X game. It was certainly the game for which the term 4X was coined, okay? But the original Master of Orion did diplomacy really, really well. It's intrinsically tied into the game's victory condition. Everything else works around the diplomacy in that game. And it's fun, it's really tight. Now, after that, because people wanted to make Master of Orion-like games, they had to put diplomacy in, because otherwise it's not a 4X, right? The problem is they don't also design the game in a tight way so the diplomacy is meaningful and difficult to cheese. And so, arguably Master of Orion had some exploits in there, but they're not really in Remnants of the Precursors, which is Ray Fowler's free remake, which everybody's got to go and play, by the way. It's one of the best games ever made. And I think that Gladius really did a big thing with taking out diplomacy, because by forcing you at war with everybody all the time, it focuses the game on what it is good at, and that is its excellent tactical combat. Now, this, to a lot of people, invalidates Warhammer 40k Gladius Relics of War from being a classic 4X. It's not really a 4X game. I've always described it as it's kind of paradoxical, but a turn-based RTS. It's like a turn-based version of StarCraft. And if you look at Gladius like a turn-based version of StarCraft, then it makes a lot more sense, I think. So, yeah, I think that's a really good example. it's arguable as to whether with Zephon, which is kind of like an unofficial sequel to Gladius, I guess, it's certainly the spiritual successor built on the same game engine. It's arguable as to whether adding diplomacy back into that game has actually made it better or not. I think the jury's out on that. But yeah, it's going to be it's difficult to kind of figure that one out. I'm still not played Zephon enough really to be able to figure that one out. But we talked about Zephon quite a lot already, haven't we?
Yeah, we have. I think it mostly works, and what you're talking about with Master of Orion, how it's sort of melded into the game, I think that's kind of how it works with Zephon, because I know I've talked about it before and I've tried it without the endgame stuff and it doesn't really work, but with the endgame stuff it works quite well. And the other one was Slipways, which I don't think you've really played, but it's sort of like a roguelite kind of economics-based game. You pick a certain sort of faction and you pick your starting buffs, and there'll be a randomly generated map or galaxy map, and you have different difficulties, and you go in and then you'll start off with a certain planet, and you've sort of got to build these supply chains. Each planet will have different biomes and different requirements and all this sort of thing, so you need to build these sort of space lanes between the planets, and it's almost puzzly. You set them up in a certain way where you basically give the planets what they need so that they can develop further economically, and then you get more money and you get more resources out of that. And I think there's an endless mode now. I didn't play it, but normally it's timed. You've got a certain amount of time to develop to a certain point, and then you win, basically. And yeah, so that's one of those things. They've stripped out a lot of the stuff and they've just gone, well, what if we just sort of like was it off-world trading company kind of thing, but without the multiplayer? So it's sort of like, what if we just put in the economic side of things and see how that works? And yeah, it works quite well, I think, as well.
Cool, man. Yeah, I need to play that one. It's another one that people were raving about on Explore Minute, and I never really got around to playing it. So I'm gonna have to check that out. Hey, Shaun, let's wrap up, man, because I think if we're not careful, we could just go on forever about cool indie games. I think this is definitely, like, I've got so many more on my list that I wanted to talk about, but we've run out of time. What do you reckon?
Yeah, this is something where I thought it up a little while ago, and I was just like, it could be interesting to talk about. And then we started actually looking into it, and I went, okay, we could get hours and hours of stuff out of this. There's so many of them out there, but I guess the idea was just sort of because I think nowadays both of us and probably a lot of people now, they're more leaning towards indie games, AA, like the lower end of things rather than the AAA space. So I guess the idea was just sort of to show a bit of appreciation for the advances that you can see in indie games, because they're not held back by things like corporate interests and I guess like your big products. They've got their focus groups and all that sort of thing. They have these massive budgets and they need to make the money, and they just sort of everything's kind of almost data driven. And like the indie space allows for a lot more creativity and building on established formulas and that sort of thing. So yeah, no, it's pretty cool.
I absolutely agree. I think this is something that we're actually going to talk about. We've got that written down as a topic, and I'd quite like to get Mark from the Electric Underground on this one, because he's agreed to come on the podcast, by the way. So I don't know. I think the one that Shaun and I are just recording is probably going to come out before that one. But yeah, Mark is going to be an interesting person to talk to about AAA games, because he's at least in terms of things like arcade games and sort of more action oriented games. He will kind of he does play those games a little bit more, and he's very, very well equipped at being able to critique the let's say the decline in quality that's happened, particularly since the remake culture thing has all started. So I think that's going to be a topic that we're going to broach there, and I'm going to see if Mark's interested in coming on for that one. But as a follow-up to this, we've got one organised. I think it's going to be myself and Mark from Electric Underground and Lucid Tactics, and we're going to be discussing game critique, the nature of game critique in the modern era, which is going to be a deep topic. Where I think we're going to be talking about things like the value of Steam reviews, both to customers and to developers, publishers, how Steam reviews and reviews in general affect games design in terms of what games developers can afford to do and not do because of the way that Steam reviews work. We're going to talk about the IGN kind of led gaming journalist outlets now, because they're pretty much all owned by IGN, or in some way or other. And how useful they are to consumers, and how they affect games and the design. Because what we're really trying to get our heads around is going to be, how do these topics affect the design of games? How does it affect the end result? I think that's what I'm personally very interested in hearing about. So you guys have got that to look forward to. It's possible that one might come out before this, but we'll see. Anyway, guys, thank you so much, Shaun. It's always great to sit and talk to you about video games, man. I always have a blast doing these.
Yeah, it's always fun, man. As soon as we get one organised, we sit down and I'm like, all right, it's quite early in the morning normally when we record at mine and I'm sort of half awake. And then we start recording and I'm like, okay, yeah, all right, I'm in it. You get in the zone and yeah, it's fun. I like it.
Yeah, we'll try and get one of these out once a week if we can. Yeah, one of the things that slows things down is that because I'm anal about the editing, I often insist on doing it myself. And then because I just get busy or I get distracted with other stuff. So I must apologize about the slightly, infrequent uploads at the moment. As of the time of speaking, I've just completed one that we recorded with Drexy a few weeks ago. It's still time relevant because we were mostly talking about game engines, actually. So it was quite an interesting discussion. Drexy had a lot to say on that topic, and I thought it was really cool. So hopefully that one should be up before you hear this one. But yeah, just a word from the editor. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit slow. I'm just I always take on too much stuff. That's just one of my problems in life, and I'm trying to sort it out. But be patient. We'll get more Meta Abuse episodes out to you soon. Thanks, guys, and thanks for listening. Hope you're enjoying it. If you do like the podcast, by the way, please leave comments in the videos on YouTube, in the comments on YouTube, or on whatever platform you're listening to it. We would really, really appreciate hearing what you guys think about these, and just share them with your friends as well. Get the word out there. If you think that other people would be interested in hearing us talk about games, and if you've got any top ideas for topics of discussion, we're all ears. Thanks a lot, and we'll catch you next time. Take care.